How's it going, everybody? And welcome to the College Basketball Podcast with your host, Alec Pecano. On today's episode of the College Basketball Podcast, I will be giving you my SEC and Big Ten basketball preview for the 2024-2025 season, as well as giving you my preseason top 25 rankings for college basketball season 2024-2025. And talking a little bit more about how this podcast is going to work at the end of the podcast. But let's get started here with my preseason, with my Big Ten basketball standings. In last place at number 18 in the Big Ten, it is their first year in the Big Ten. I have University of Southern Cal. And again, these are my standings. These could be wrong at the end of the season, or they could be spot on. I don't think University of Southern Cal has that much talent this year. But then again, they could have somebody come out of nowhere and just lead them to the promised land, and they end up winning the Big Ten. But again, on the other side of that card is what I just said a minute ago, is that they could be absolutely horrendous. And it is their first year in a new conference for basketball. And them being a new member to the Big Ten in basketball. And I think that they're going to have an okay season in their first year, finishing second to last in the Big Ten. I have Washington. Now, Washington, I can see the same thing as Southern Cal. Even though it's their first year in the Big Ten, I could either see them have one of two things happen. If they get up to a really good start and end up finishing in the middle of the pack in the Big Ten, or they're just awful this year because they're trying to adjust to being in a different conference than the Pac-12. And I think that's the more logical outcome here, is them finishing near the bottom of the Big Ten in their first year in the conference. At number 15 in the Big Ten, I have Minnesota. At number 16 in the Big Ten, I have Northwestern. Northwestern's a team that, with Pat Chambers, I think it's either whoever their head coach is, they have, I think it's Chris Collins, they have a tendency to have some good seasons. They have once or twice a season. Every 2 or 3 seasons, they have a season where they go on a magical run and make the tournament. I don't think that's going to happen this year. I've looked over their roster. They do have talent, but they also have a lot of underclassmen. And that's the one thing for me that scares me about Northwestern, is all this underclassmen, all the underclassmen that are on their roster. And I don't think there's a shot that Northwestern finishes higher than 10 in the Big Ten this year. Now we get to Minnesota at 15. Minnesota's a team that they're like, I'm going to use the equivalent. They're like Vanderbilt. They're just there. They're like that bug on the wall that you smash and you think is gone, but it comes back again, and you try to destroy it again, and it just keeps coming back, and it won't go away. And it's that irritation. And that's what Minnesota is. They stick around, and they could give teams a scare in the Big Ten this year. And as an Ohio State fan, Minnesota's one of the teams I am worried about. At number 14 in the Big Ten is Penn State. Penn State's another team that they can be really good, or they can be awful. And I think that Penn State is going to be middle of the pack this year in the Big Ten. And there's nothing bad about that. But then again, they could be that team that nobody's talking about right now in the preseason. And they just come out of nowhere and they end up winning the conference. Do I think that happens? There's always that possibility that there's that one team in the conference that comes out of nowhere and goes on a tear and ends up winning the regular season title in the Big Ten. At number 13 in the Big Ten, I have Nebraska. Now, I'm not going to say Nebraska's not good in basketball. It's just I can't see them being they're going to be competitive in every game. I just can't see them hanging around the top of the Big Ten for a long time. If they do, and they end up winning the Big Ten, this prediction and this standings prediction that I make today is going to look awful. Number 12 in the Big Ten, I have Oregon. And now Oregon has the tendency to be very, very competitive. They were ultra competitive in the Pac-12. And I think they can be competitive in the Big Ten and compete to be in the top 10 in the Big Ten in basketball. At number 11, Michigan fans, I'm sorry. I can't put you higher than number 11. You have a new head coach, and you retooled your roster through the portal. And I think it's going to be 1 or 2 years before you're back near the top of the Big Ten in basketball. At number 10 is Maryland. And Maryland, for me, they did, I think, lose Jameer Young, who graduated. But for me, Maryland is further ahead in their rebuild than Michigan is. Michigan's just starting their rebuild in basketball compared to Maryland. Maryland's gone through their rebuild, and they're in a phase now where they're going to compete in the Big Ten. And they might be scary in the Big Ten. At number 9 in the Big Ten, I have Rutgers. And I think Rutgers is a team that's going to be really good this year in the Big Ten. They might win the Big Ten for all we know. At number 8, I've got another new Big Ten team and UCLA. Out of all the 4 Pac-12 schools that came to the Big Ten, I think UCLA is going to have the most success in year one because, of course, UCLA has a rich tradition in basketball. And I think that's going to help them compete in year one in the Big Ten in basketball. Number 7 in the Big Ten is Iowa for me. Until Fran McCaffrey retires, it's just like Kirk Ferentz. Iowa's just going to be that annoying little pest that sticks around and you swat them away and they just come back and they won't quit. Number 6 in the Big Ten for me is Indiana. And I don't know. I'm going to keep it simple with Indiana. I think they're going to be really good this year. At number 5, I have Illinois. Illinois did lose Terrence Shannon, but I still think Illinois is going to be really good this year. And I can see Illinois being one of those sleeper teams to finish in the top 4 in the Big Ten. Speaking of my top 4 in the Big Ten, let's get to number 4, Michigan State. Until Tom Izzo retires, Michigan State will be a perennial threat in the Big Ten. And I'm not against it at all. At number 3 is Purdue. And Matt Painter is the coach of Purdue. And Purdue made a deep run last year with Zach Edey, but he is gone. But I still think Purdue's going to finish in the top 3 of the Big Ten. At number 2 is Ohio State. And the main reason they're at number 2 and not number 1 is because they have a rookie head coach, Jake Diebler, but they did do a lot of damage in the transfer portal. And they actually took the portal a lot more serious than I thought they were going to. They got a lot of transfers, and they got 3 of their top 4 scorers returning next year. And Bruce Thornton, Roddy Gale. No, I think Roddy Gale's got, but Bruce Thornton. And that's the only one I can remember off the top of my head. But they will finish second, and winning the Big Ten in the regular season and finishing first is Greg Gard in Wisconsin. Wisconsin, to me, is the scariest team in the Big Ten this year. Now, we get to my preseason top 25, and then we will get to my SEC standings. At number 25 in my preseason top 25, I have University of South Florida. The reigning AAC regular season champs. And they return a lot of their production from last year, does USF. And I think they're going to do really good this year, again in the American. And I think they might win the American again in 2024. At number 24 is a team I just spoke of. They're in the Big Ten. It is Rutgers. Rutgers worries me a lot because they have the tendency to stick around in games that they're not supposed to here in basketball because it's 2 20-minute halves. And I can see Rutgers being really good. They're at number 24. Number 23 is the only A-Sun team I have ranked, and it is Lipscomb. Lipscomb's a team, and later on this week, I will be doing my AAC and A-Sun preseason standings and telling you about guys to watch from both conferences. I didn't get a chance to do that for the Big Ten or the SEC, but the rest of these, the next couple, you will get players to watch from each conference. At number 22 is Dayton. Yes, I had to have Dayton ranked in the preseason poll, but Dayton returns a lot of their production from last year. And can they win the A-10? I believe they can. You will eventually, that might be one of the last conferences I do a preview for, is the A-10. At number 21 is Virginia Tech. I got to give them the respect they deserve. I think they're going to have a huge year this year in the ACC. Maybe not win the ACC, but they might make a deep run in the ACC tournament and make the either NIT or one of the postseason basketball tournaments. At number 20 is South Carolina. South Carolina has turned into a basketball somewhat juggernaut in the SEC. Did I get that? Oh, okay. I was trying to make sure that I didn't miss them in the SEC thing, which is coming up in a little bit. But back to South Carolina. They have been really good the last couple of years in basketball, and I don't think that's going to stop this year. At number 19 in my preseason top 25 college basketball rankings, I have Michigan State. Like I just said in the Big Ten standings preview, predictions for 2024-2025 season, Until Tom Izzo retires, Michigan State is always going to be good in basketball. And I think they'll still be good even after he leaves. At number 18 is another AAC team. It is Memphis. Memphis and USF are probably going to be the two teams at the top of the AAC in basketball like they were last year. Maybe along with FAU, who I chose not to rank for particularly obvious reasons because they lost a lot of production. But at number 17, we've got SMU, ACC team now. And I think SMU is another team that's going to stick around in these rankings. And before I get to number 16, the way that the rankings work the same way for basketball as they do for football. 2 wins in a row, you stay in the rankings, or you get put in the rankings. If you win by, I'm going to say, we're going to switch it up for basketball a little bit. If you win by 20 or more, you get moved up however many spots you won by. Same thing if you lose by 20 or more, you get moved down. And if you lose 2 games in a row, you move down, you're out of the rankings, but you can always get back into the rankings. Now let's get to number 16, and it is a Big 12 team and Kansas State. Kansas State's another team in basketball that has always been good, and I don't think that's going to change this year. At number 15 is a new member to the Big 12 in Arizona. And I think Arizona is going to have a bounce back year in basketball. They had a good year last year, but they got knocked out in the tournament. And I think they have a good year really good year this year. At number 14 is Ohio State. And we just went over the Big Ten a minute ago. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. I think Bruce Thornton has a breakout season for Ohio State. Number 13 is the second straight Big Ten team, Indiana. Indiana returns a lot of its production from last year, and I think Indiana is going to be really good this year. And at number 12 is the third straight Big Ten team in this portion of the rankings, and it is UCLA. UCLA has a rich history in basketball, and I don't think that's going to change. I think they're going to be really good. At number 11 is the second SEC team we're going to talk about today, and it is the Gators of Florida. Todd Golden has done a really good job of recruiting, and I think Florida is in for a huge year in the SEC. At number 10 in the rankings is another SEC school, and it is Kentucky. Coach Cal not there anymore. Doesn't matter. I think they are still going to be really good. At number 9 is UNC. Number 8 is Duke. Number 7, Bama. At number 6, Baylor. Houston's at 5. Purdue at 4. Tennessee at 3. 2 is Auburn. And 1 is UConn. Now we get to the SEC basketball standings for prediction for 2024-2025. Finishing in last place in the SEC is Mississippi State. And it's sad because Mississippi State is usually very competitive. I'm on YouTube. I'm on YouTube. Jesus. Sorry about that. Mississippi State is in a rebuild in basketball, and I think they might be competitive this year, but not enough to make the SEC tournament. Number 15, Oklahoma. First year in the SEC. Like Mississippi State, they're in a kind of a rebuild spot, and I think that maybe 1 or 2 years down the road, they will be competing every year in the SEC. Number 14, Missouri. Stinks to see me put Missouri this low. Now, again, like I said with the Big Ten, these standings could blow up in my face, and we could have teams finish who knows where. They could finish. These standings could be flipped. But Missouri is another team that's kind of rebuilding. And the theme here is they have young talent, but can the young talent step up and help them win? Number 13, Georgia. Georgia, I can see being a lot more competitive than Missouri, Oklahoma, and Mississippi State, but they won't finish in the top 12 in the SEC. Because at number 12, I have Ole Miss. And I believe Ole Miss is due to have some good fortunes come their way in 2024, 2025. And I think that's going to happen. Number 11 is LSU. I think LSU is in for a big year in the SEC, but I don't think it's going to be good enough to finish inside the top 10. But again, I could be wrong. At number 10, I have a team that was ranked in my rankings in my preseason top 25, the Florida Gators. I think Todd Golden has the Gators playing really well, and they will play well again this year, well enough to make the SEC tournament and maybe make a somewhat big run in the SEC tournament. Number 9 in the SEC, I've got Texas A&M Aggies. And the Aggies, I think, are another team that could stick around. Maybe they finish top 5 in the SEC at the end of the year. But I think A&M, they have some really good guards. And could that be a stepping stone for them to finish higher in the SEC? Absolutely. At number 8 is Texas A&M's biggest rival, Texas. I understand it's Texas's first year in the SEC, but we've seen what they've done in football. I think they could do the exact same thing in basketball. And that Texas A&M Texas rivalry in basketball is going to hit different. At number 7 in the SEC is Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt is a basketball school, folks. Yes, I know they're ranked for the first time since 2012 in football, going into play at Texas this week in football. And I will talk about that on my podcast, my football podcast, college football podcast, with my co-host for that tomorrow night. But I think Vandy's going to have a really good year in basketball as well, finishing 7th in the SEC. And 6th in the SEC in 2024-2025 is going to be Auburn. And I think Auburn is going to make a deep run in March Madness again, and maybe even win March Madness. I will have a video on that later on with my top 5 teams that I think can win the championship in men's college basketball this year, as well as some sleeper teams. Be looking out for that video at some point. At number 5 is South Carolina. And I just mentioned how they are ranked in my preseason top 25. And I think they're a team that's going to be around the 4 or 5 range in the SEC. And I think they're going to be really good this year in basketball. At number 4 is Tennessee. Yes, I know Tennessee lost Dalton Connect, But they got a guy that was at UNF and he put up buckets. I'm going to shout him out right now because I'm really good friends with him. Chaz Lanier. Tennessee fans, look out for Chaz Lanier, the transfer from North Florida. And I think that's the main reason Tennessee will finish inside the top 4 in the SEC. At number 3 is Alabama. Bama is a really good basketball school, surprisingly. And I think that's going to continue this year. At number 2 is Kentucky. No Calipari, no problem. They still finish inside the top 5 of the SEC. And they can still recruit. And at number 1 in the SEC in 2024-2025, I have Arkansas with guess who? John Calipari. Because Eric Musselman got left and took another job. So they went out and poached John Calipari away from Kentucky. And I think Arkansas wins the SEC regular season title. And as I was saying, I have 3 other podcasts that I run. 3 of them by myself and 1 of them with a co-host. The first one is the Pro Football Podcast, which there will be 2 episodes of that tomorrow. And then I run the 4th and Long podcast on Mondays by myself, and then Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday with my co-host Bradley. And then I run the 4 Quarters podcast by myself. And we had our first episode of that last night, which if you haven't already, please go watch it. And if you've enjoyed this video, please remember to give this video a like, comment, and subscribe, and also turn on notifications. But that's going to wrap up this episode of the 4th and Long, of the college basketball podcast. I see everybody back here tonight at 10 p.m. for the 4th and Long podcast, where I will be giving out my Week 9 college football rankings, upset picks, game picks, and we're going to talk about everything else going in the world of college football, which there was some big news over the weekend. A couple coaches were fired, a couple offensive coordinators, but I will see everybody here at 10 o'clock tonight.